The cellar. Asterisk asterisk. Emily shivered on the cold, damp floor of Mrs. Carmody's cellar. The air down there was always freezing, despite the heat outside. Her wrists were raw from the ropes cutting into her skin, and the chain attached to the wall barely allowed her to move. Upstairs, she heard Mrs. Carmody's voice, barking orders at her sons, Jake and Timmy. They were boys Emily once played with, boys she had known her whole life. But now, they only visited her to hurt her. They never came alone. They brought their friends, always grinning as they opened the cellar door. Each visit brought more torment, new ways to humiliate and torture her. It had started so differently. 2 weeks ago, her parents had gone out of town for the weekend. Mrs. Carmody, ever friendly, had offered to watch Emily. Her parents trusted her completely, as did everyone in their small town. Mrs. Carmody baked cookies and smiled sweetly in front of adults, always giving the impression of a perfect neighbor. But the moment Emily was alone with her, the sweetness vanished. Mrs. Carmody slapped her when she asked to call her parents and dragged her into the cellar, locking her away. At first, Emily had screamed for help, but no one heard. Mrs. Carmody seemed to enjoy her terror, watching her cry and beg for release. The cellar was filled with rusty tools and chains, waiting for their purpose. Emily lost track of time. She didn't know if her parents had returned, or if they even knew she was missing. Mrs. Carmody only fed her enough to keep her alive, leaving her weak and starving. Yet, the worst part wasn't the hunger or the beatings. It was the visits. Jake, Timmy, and their friends came to the cellar regularly, laughing as they heard her. They played twisted games, using knives, fists, and ropes, while Mrs. Carmody watched with a satisfied smile. Sometimes other boys joined in. Boys Emily knew from school, who now treated her like a toy, not a person. One night, Emily lay huddled in the darkest corner of the cellar, listening to the boys whisper about what they would do to her next. She closed her eyes tightly, trying to block out their words. But then, she heard something new. A low, menacing growl echoed from the far corner of the cellar. The boys stopped talking, their laughter cut short. Emily's heart pounded as she strained her eyes to see into the shadows. Something was there, lurking in the darkness. It moved, and it wasn't human,